Usborne Publishing is who I work for. I'm Katie Daynes and I write children's books. And I write a special kind of children's books. The books I write are non-fiction. So question number one, what does non-fiction mean? Yeah, they're real. Do you know, I love that answer because sometimes people say information books, which is true as well. But they're real. Non-fiction is real life, what is actually going on or what's gone on in the past or how things work. And some people think non-fiction's a bit boring and they'd rather read, well, so I love to read a book about unicorns or witches and wizards, and that's wonderful. But non-fiction, I get so excited about writing non-fiction books because you have to be detective. You have to really, really explore a subject and ask a lot of questions about it. Get really good at asking the right questions, and then hopefully you find out important answers. So here today at North Yorkshire Libraries, thank you very much for having me. I absolutely love this library. It's incredible. I've not been before, and it's such a lovely space. And also want to say a big thank you to Refugee Council, in particular Amanda, who's at the back there, because together we created something quite special, which I'm going to share with you. And also the fact that we're in North Yorkshire is particularly lovely because, okay, go on, a sneak preview. The book that I wrote with Amanda's help and the Refugee Council, we also got a lot of help from refugees in the North Yorkshire area. So went and met and talked to families who've settled in Catterick, in Ballerton, in Skipton, and that's what made this book really work as an exploration of the topic, is asking questions of the people who really know the answers, which are the people who themselves have gone on a journey. So we go on the next slide. There is an exciting thing to celebrate today, which is North Yorkshire Library getting the Library of Sanctuary Award. I thought this was going to be a difficult question, but I think you guys might already know the answer to this. So what does sanctuary mean? Because I think you guys, hasn't your school got a sanctuary award as well? So what do you think sanctuary means? It's a yeah, what does it mean?
Safe place.
Safe place, spot on, absolutely, yeah. So your school has become a safe place where you can welcome people and everybody feels safe. And that's what North Yorkshire Libraries have done, is they've worked really hard to make their libraries safe places. And we all want a safe place to be, don't we? Maybe have a little think, what makes a place feel safe? Can you describe something about a place that makes it feel safe to you? Yeah?
Like safe adults.
Safe adults, yeah. Knowing that you can trust the adults, yeah. Yeah. There's no bad things happening. Yes, you want to know nothing bad's going wrong. Yeah, absolutely. Now, who are the people that might need sanctuary most of all? Who might need a safe place? There's a bit of a clue on the slide here. Yeah. Yeah. Refugees, that's right. The refugees are people who are looking for a safe place, aren't they? Because sadly they've had to leave their countries because it's not been safe. Yeah, and that's something that I want to talk about. There are many reasons why people are forced to leave their countries, and they're extremely sad reasons, and won't go into too much detail. When I was writing this book, so we've got here sort of who are refugees. It's all in a question and answer format. So you ask the question and you try and find the best answer, which isn't always easy. I'll just read this. Refugees are people who have been forced to flee their home, finding refuge, a safe place to live in another country. Many countries around the world have agreed to protect refugees, promising never to send someone back to a country where their life or freedom is at risk. And then it says, why do people become refugees? Because their lives are in danger. For example, war can make lots of people refugees. Other people may become refugees if their safety is threatened because of who they are, what they believe, or who they love. People who flee natural disasters and extreme weather aren't yet officially recognised as refugees in other countries, but they need safe places to live too. So that's just some examples of who becomes a refugee. Anyone can become a refugee if the circumstances are like that in their country. I found this poem by Whartonshire, and I'll just read it to you here. So, what makes people leave their homes? The first verse of her poem goes, no one leaves home unless home is in half of a sharp. You only run for the border when you see the whole city running as well. And then later on in the poem, it says, you have to understand that no one puts their children in a boat unless the water is safer than land. And when I started the talk and talked about non-fiction and real and how important it is to ask questions, you'll all be aware of news, won't you? You'll all be aware of opinions out there that aren't necessarily reflecting the truth. And you may even hear things that our governments and governments in other countries are saying that aren't very welcoming to refugees. And in fact, this book was sent to the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary and some of the important people in the government, because when they're making their statements, they have to remember the people they're talking about. It was like they were in the mouth of the shark, and the safest option was to get into the water, into those small boats. So really important as you go through your lives that you guys keep asking questions and finding out the right answers, and don't necessarily just listen to the headlines. Journey. This is one thing that it helped me to get my head around. If you're a refugee and you're forced to leave your country and you're embarking on a journey, I mean, I imagine you guys have been on some big journeys. Has anyone here been abroad? Right, a few, over half of you, definitely. Okay, did you fly somewhere? Did you go on a train? Do you want to tell me?
I went to Egypt.
Oh, wow, okay, I'm jealous. So I imagine you went in an aeroplane to Egypt, yeah. And was it, I mean, obviously quite a long journey, but was it quite easy?
It was a bit boring.
And when you went to the airport, did you have to show some paperwork or something to?
I had my passport with me and it was like very
So here we've got the order. You need a passport or a visa, or you need some paperwork to actually be allowed into another country. Refugees fleeing their danger, they don't necessarily have any paperwork. So they reach a border and they're not allowed through. They're trying to run away from danger, but they're trapped. And that's why they end up having to take the risks and maybe going on a really, really long walk through forests and over mountains to find the border crossings where there aren't men with guns and barriers. So that's why they risk going on a small boat, which is crammed full of too many people and probably shouldn't be going on a big sea journey at all. And it's because they don't have this bit of paper that we're all lucky that we can apply for, and we get a passport and we can go on holiday and see new places. And that's just not an option for a lot of people. So it's just useful to understand, whilst for us, traveling to another country is a wonderful thing that we can do quite easily. For a lot of people, it really isn't. So refugees have left their country. One of the places they might go to is a refugee camp. So this is where, probably just over the border in the next door country, organisations from all around the world will work together to quickly create a safe place. So talking about sanctuaries, safe places, and sometimes the first safe place is a camp that starts off small, gets bigger and bigger. Lots of resources are sent, food and water. Quite a complicated thing to set up, you can imagine. But then, interestingly, but over time, they might even develop into their own towns, with actual, brick buildings, and sometimes a refugee camp can become a whole town. Useful to think, if you're leaving in a hurry, you need to pack very quickly and you've only got a small bag, what would you actually take with you? We've got some real examples here of refugees who they reached the Greek islands. I think they'd fled from Syria, and the different examples are really incredible and powerful. What they chose to take. Can anyone really, on the spur of the moment, think if you suddenly had to leave your house and you could only take 2 or 3 things, what would you quickly put in your bag? What's the most important thing to you? Yeah, clothes. Clothes would be great, wouldn't it? Yeah, but you might not be able to take very many. You'd have to find your favourite t-shirt. Yeah, what would you
My
take?
favourite small teddy.
Your favourite small teddy?
Packages and food.
Yes, yes, brilliant. Yeah, food, gosh, so important, isn't it? You don't know where you'd find your next meal. And I think I'd take a teddy too, because that would be that comfort, wouldn't it? Let's do so I've got some examples here. Abuasa, she took with her a sun hat, baby wipes, sunscreen, and baby food. And the quote she said to the workers supporting her was, "Everything is for my baby to protect her from sickness." So she didn't think of herself at all when she packed. She packed just for what her baby needed. Um, Omran, aged 6, this is so heartbreaking, but he took bandages for any scrapes as he treks through the forest, and he took marshmallows because they're his favourite sweet. And then we've got a pharmacist who didn't want to be named, aged 34. He took photos saved on a memory stick. And his quote was, "I thought, if I die on this boat, at least I will die with the photos of my family near me." I thought was really powerful, and interesting to know that the phone and the charger were so important for him as well. Phones are lifelines for refugees, for staying in touch, planning ahead, and finding their way. So we've got these refugees on the move. They've not got much to take with them. Some of them will be going and finding a lot of them a sanctuary in a refugee camp. And then, do you know, there's probably only about 1 out of 100 from the refugee camps will actually then end up being resettled in another country. And some of the refugees I met in Skipton, they had come on a resettlement programme. Some Afghan families that we met in Catterick and North Allerton, they were on a resettlement programme. So they had been given permission to come to our country and then a settlement programme. And have a think about what it's actually like to arrive in a safe place. I mean, you guys, you'll all have changed school at some point, won't you? You might have moved countries, like being from South Africa. What's the most important thing when you start in a new place? What do you think really helps? Yeah,
You should like try and find some people to play with.
yeah, that's really really helpful, isn't it? And they might you might not speak the same language as them, so that can be tricky. But there's things like football, which everyone speaks football, don't they? So there's ways that you can help people to get involved, even if you don't have the language in common. Yeah,
You can get your phone just so you can translate the languages.
that's a great idea. So have your phone, so if the person says something to you, you can then do a kind of Google Translate. Yeah. In fact, just on the way in, I saw there was a welcome sign in all sorts of different languages, and that's so lovely, isn't it? If you arrive in this country as a refugee, you won't have anywhere to live. So that's really important, isn't it? And money, and yes, learning a language, and there's all kinds of ways that you'll need support. And I guess as a school of sanctuary, as a library of sanctuary, and just as kind of caring people, finding ways that we can be welcoming to others is so important. Just a smile makes such a difference, doesn't it? You just speak the language to show that you are welcoming. If you give someone a smile, that can really help their day. Kindness goes a very long way. I just want to share that with you. There was a refugee from he moved age 9 to the UK from Bosnia, and it's called Smayo, and he helped advise on this book as well. Um, and there's a picture of him here. But under the kindness goes a very long way black. The story that he told, which I thought was very powerful. He says, "When I arrived from Bosnia, age 9, I couldn't understand a word of English and felt so homesick. Secretly, my new teacher taught everyone the class song in Bosnian. When they sang it, I couldn't believe my ears. It was a turning point in my life. Now I welcome new refugees to the city that welcomed me." So he lives in Newcastle, and there he was. Imagine being in a classroom and everyone's sort of making this noise you can't understand. And there's a song, you get used to the tune because maybe it's once a week or something, the class song, everyone sings it, and you're just sort of, yeah, coming along maybe. And then one day, complete surprise, the teacher has translated it into Bosnian, has taught all the class, and suddenly the language they're singing their school song in is the language you understand. I thought that was such a lovely example of how kindness. And that he met up with that teacher about 20 years later, and she'd forgotten that story. For her, that was just an obviously nice thing to do, but for him, that stuck with him for his whole life, and that's made him the kind, like, yeah. So yeah, there's a little example. Shall we just see if there's anyone got any questions for me?
What made you get into writing books?
Ooh, I think my sister would tell you that I've always been a storyteller, and I've always been, I just love words, and I love describing things. And my first job was reviewing curry houses, so that was quite fun. But I've also had experience teaching, so I kind of wanted to put them together, and I thought, how can I use words on the page to teach subjects? So that was it really. And the Usborne job is lovely because you're in-house with a team. You're not sort of just pitching a book idea to a publisher. You're working within the company, and you're working together to create a project. And I love working with an illustrator. I must just say, actually, this illustrator, Oksana Drakshkovska, she's Ukrainian, and she agreed to to illustrate this book really soon after Russia invaded Ukraine. And she was a refugee, first of all in Poland and then in Spain. And while we were asking how she was getting on with the artwork, she moved house 11 different times because she was trying to find a safe place. So I'm really grateful to her for everything she's put into this. Sorry. Another question. Yeah. Did it take a long time? It did take a long time. I think the research is such an important part of a book like this, and being able to arrange meetings to meet with refugee families and talk with them, and then the text starts coming together. But because it's it's highly visual, and you've got to get the blacks working, I work with a designer who does rough sketches, and when they're looking good, that's when we commission the illustrations. And sometimes it's the artwork that takes the longest. So I'd say probably about 6 months altogether. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you remember the first book you wrote?
Yes, because I actually studied French and Italian at university, and the first book they asked me to do when I joined Usborne was called Easy French. So that was quite nice to be able to use the subject I'd studied and make a book to make that clearer to kids. Yeah.
What inspired you?
What inspired me? Wow. So I love writing about important topics, and I think it's really interestingly, there wasn't a book like this out there. There were books, really some beautiful picture books about the journeys that refugees go on, but a very sort of straightforward questions and answers book just wasn't out there. And I was in Skipton. I was very aware there were Syrian and Afghan families that were finding their new homes in our town, and I volunteered to English language lessons. So we would give them an opportunity to speak English, basically. And it was so, I felt so privileged to be letting on their lives and the journey they'd been on. So when there was an opportunity to write this, I was very happy to do so. But I needed a lot of help from people who'd got much more experience than me. Yeah.
Is Albert Einstein the most famous refugee in the world?
He is a refugee, and I mean, he is pretty famous as well. Yeah, so he's a good example. We've got a few examples in the beginning of the book, actually. When we say, can anyone be a refugee? And we've got Albert Einstein in there. We've got Judith Kerr. I don't know if any of you have heard of her. She's a children's author, actually. Wrote When Hitler Stole Pink Rabbit. She's a refugee. And Bob Marley. Anyone know him? Don't worry, be happy song. Yeah, so he was a refugee. Yeah, and that's another thing that we talk about is how refugees enrich other countries, and a lot of them, well, just have amazing life stories and they're really inspirational people and go on and do really, really great things. Let's ask. Yeah.
What is your favourite book you've made?
Favourite book I've made? I mean, this has got to be up there. This feels pretty special. And then to go to the other extreme, when I started off the very first questions and answers, I did a book called What is Poo? And it is lovely. Yeah, it is really it is a good book.